Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to the BannermanTech podcast with Corey Bannerman and my guest, my first guest, and this is a repeat. I felt like we had a lot more that we wanted to talk about, so decided the second episode would be with Jeremy Wonson again. So Jeremy is a Field CIO with our DCT practice at CDW. We've been working together for a while now in public sector. If you didn't see our first conversation, I'd start there because we're going to kind of pick up where we left off, which was graduate or out of college and out in the workforce and had some interesting jobs. You talked about the Target company, which is really cool. I actually did some shooting last weekend with my brother-in-law, and we have some AR 500 steel targets hanging from trees, and they're a lot of fun. But I think it's more fun if you can program kind of a game out of it, a little skill in it. So I wonder how much did those run back then, just out of curiosity?
They were several $1,000s a piece, and then you had to have your own laptop, right? So yeah, I mean, we went to a place. It's interesting you say like, oh, I'd love to have this, because I went to this place called Thunder Ranch, and we provided all the law enforcement folks. When I say Thunder Ranch, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But
is it in Texas?
Well, I think so. It was in Texas. I think they moved it actually. But when I was at it, when I went there, it was in Texas.
Okay.
But yeah, it's basically like they had two things. One was a Old West style town, and so, on movies
cool.
that they put up, the storefronts and all that, like it's all just the fronts of the buildings. It was like that, and then they had a whole
cut out.
Yeah, oh yeah, totally.
Looks real from the front, nothing behind it.
Cardboard. It was like plywood, but yeah, plywood cutouts of everything, and then they would have targets that would pop out at different times, and they'd have different situations that tactical situations you have to go through. The great thing about it is you train using your service arm, right? So whatever firearm you carry, if you're in SWAT, maybe you're using like an automatic or burst kind of weapon, but otherwise it's just a firearm, your service, firearm, whatever that is. And you go through these situations, and they'll tell you like, okay, shoot anything that pops out, and you're going down the road, and all of a sudden something pops out, and you got to shoot it. And once again, it's scoring. Everything is computer controlled, but it also has sensors out there, and that reports back, to the computer. They know when where you shot, and if you hit the target, and when that kind of thing, right? And then the other thing that they did was a house. So not really a house. It was a maze, I guess you could say, right? And so they had this huge ballistic safe walls, right? It was like a big building with catwalks up on the top, and ballistic safe walls that would move, they could actually move and latch into place, so you could change the layout, and you wouldn't shoot through the wall. It's a ballistic safe wall. And then they would put all these little they put all these scenarios in there, and these were mostly paper targets at that point, right? Because you were shooting at paper targets on ballistic safe walls. And so, you'd go through, and once again, hearing protection, eye protection, but you have your service weapon. You're actually shooting live ammo, but everything's safe. And so you go through this.
Mommy or mom?
That's my mom. Let me just silence that.
You're all good.
But anyway, yeah, you'd go through this maze, and they were kind of looking at what you're doing, recording your progress, seeing what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, helping you to hone your craft, right? Be better at keeping the innocent safe, and taking out threats before they can harm anybody else. So it was pretty neat. One of my treasured things is a Thunder Ranch belt buckle.
Oh yeah, cool. Cool. Yeah. I have a Map Champion belt buckle that I got at AWS that I thought when I got it, I was like, oh man, but at the same time, it still sits somewhere on this desk. So I know how that is. Your goofy belt buckle that,
I
you,
don't
yeah,
know.
I think those are called kill houses. I've heard
Yeah.
military special ops guys talk about them. And have you ever done so I did IDPA a couple of
Oh yeah.
times, a couple of
Yeah.
years back, and it was similar. They set up, wood barriers and,
Yeah.
reload on the move and don't, get out around the corner. And there's so
Right.
much to that world, man. God bless people who have to do that for their job. I like to shoot for fun and, learn all that stuff for fun and, home defense, but like, yeah, that's intense for sure and super,
So
super cool.
I went through all these different departments, and I wasn't sure exactly why they kept moving me around. Looking back on this from with all these years experience, looking back, I realized they were trying to groom me into some sort of leadership position. But at the time, I didn't really understand that. I just, I did so many things, wore so many hats, and they were
Yeah.
really like introducing me to all the different parts of the business. And then um, I I decided at some point that it would make more sense for me to move to Texas and hang around family there and go to school there
Yep.
uh, for my to get into med school, for my biology degree, pre-med. And so I told them, hey, we're moving to Texas, and they said, well, what if we made you like head of customer service? We need to build a customer service department. Like every aspect of this business. You've been out and talked to our customers. You've been to our training events. Like, why don't we just make you head of customer service? We'll increase your pay. You can keep going to school here. I'm like, guys, I want to be a doctor. Like, you're not going to increase my pay that much.
Yeah.
So I left and went to San Antonio, and I think I already maybe have told you this. I was going to school full time, working full time, wife and a couple kids
Yep.
as a bellman at the Hyatt Resort, and then I got a job. I got a job at a place called U.S. Long Distance,
Hmm.
and it's telco, long distance telco, and I was just like a billing operator,
Yep.
right? And I knew some Unix, like a little bit, but not much. And I got to know Unix a little better. And then I was always curious, right? So they gave us a run book, and it was like, here's how you print the bills, make sure that the billing jobs happen, give things to QA, like here are the parts of your job, and I would do all those things. But I was always curious, like something would error out, and we had to call the programmers, call the developers, hey, billing cycle, 5 is broken. It came up with this error code. But I didn't leave it at that. You were supposed to just say, tell them that, and then they call you back and say, okay, run it again.
Yep.
I would always ask, what does that code mean?
Yeah.
What happened? And so I
Um,
started having these conversations with the developers. They're like, wow, you really want to know? Sure, I'll tell you. And
no.
so and I knew a little bit of Unix, and so they were like, hey, just break out of that billing cycle now. Change over to this directory. And they started showing me stuff because they realized I was curious. After a while, I got to know the billing system really, really well.
That'll
And
do it.
and then there was a point where I knew the billing system as well as any of the programmers.
Hmm.
And then because I kept studying it and looking at everything, and
Did you go and learn some programming in the background? Did that prompt you to
I was
start them? Yep.
yeah, I was doing C++,
Yep.
a little bit of COBOL, but anyway, yeah, C++ and COBOL, and then because at the time, universities are always behind, right? And
Yeah.
that's what they were doing. So we had this relationship, and then some of those programmers or developers, they left and went on to work for other companies, and then there was a point where there was this one programmer named Andrea, and it was just or Andrea, whatever, but Andrea and me were the only two that knew the billing system that well. Like everybody else, um, they were lagging behind. There were gaps in knowledge. And not only that, but I also found out that as I went through this, that the billing operators, the people like that, my job,
Yeah.
their documentation was all different, and they didn't agree. And some of them I knew some of them were wrong, and where some of them were right, and everything. And so I thought, why don't I just correct it and make a one version, that
Yep.
is correct. And then I got a little bored, and so I was like, I want to do some HTML programming. So I turned it into a website with links.
Nice. Created a
And
wiki.
then yeah, and then I created a troubleshooting guide, right? And so I was like, well, we have all these new programmers, all these new developers, and they don't know where to look if there's an issue, right? They have to kind of go chase the thread and figure out where. So why don't I just give them a shortcut for that kind of stuff? And so I built a troubleshooting guide, but I made that a secure web page, so they had to log in, and
Yep.
only developers could actually get in. That was kind of fun. And then, like I said before, at some point I got tired of working for an abusive boss, so I went to the director, Terry, and I just said, I'm out. And
Yep.
he offered me to work, that I work for him, but he said, we'll train you and everything. This is a full-time job. You'll be on call 24/7.
Yep.
You report to me, but you still have to keep everything up and running and all that. And so I don't know how you can try to do school at the same time, but I don't know how you're going to do that. I had already switched over to I think computer science at the time. Business information. No, I don't know.
Well, hold
Anyway,
on. So hold on,
yeah,
pause there. So you switched at that time. Was it that job and your experiences there that made you rethink? Like how did you get off being a
really.
doctor? 'Cause-
As soon as well, okay. Oh, I thought I told you about that.
no.
So I essentially, as a bellman, I talked to too many doctors. There were
Oh, you
lots of
did say that.
doctors.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, they were coming from like Dallas and other areas, and they wanted to play at SeaWorld and stuff, and go downtown to the Riverwalk and everything. And San Antonio is a great place to visit. And I just talked to too many doctors, and they basically said like, it's not what it used to be. Like insurance companies dictate everything, dictate all the care. Like you were just not going to enjoy this. Or this is the reality. And then I came up with, I'm not going to enjoy that. Right. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. So I just said, nah, I gotta change to something else. And so I
Gotcha.
changed to IT, and then I happened to find, one of my friends that was a valet.
Mhm.
His brother was at US Long Distance, and he was able to get my resume over there and get an interview. Uh, anyway,
Yeah, it's
so
all about who you know, right? People
yeah,
always every good job I've ever had some kind of personal connection
yeah.
in some way that contributed to it, even if I applied and did the interview and all that. But
Well, it's just
that's
the
awesome.
opportunity to get an at bat, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
like you get somebody the job, but
Yeah, that
yeah,
rarely ever happens. A lot of people ask for that, or people think that someone does that for some. It's like that's not how this works. Unless you are literally the owner of the company or the person with the hiring decision. It's like you can put people up all day long, and they can be the
right.
best people ever. But yeah,
No, they still have to win the job. It's just,
yep,
yeah, I can get you an interview, or I could probably get you,
a
in
look.
contact with the hiring manager. They'll look, but that doesn't mean
Yep.
you'll get it. You still have to win it. Anyway, so yeah, I took this job. I took the sysadmin job rather than leaving USLD. And sure enough, I was getting pages while I was in the middle of tests. I'm in the testing center and I get a page, and I can't ignore it because typically those pages mean like the system's down. We're no longer creating bills. We're no longer pulling call records off the switch. Like we need you now. And
Yep.
so I had to leave. And I failed tests. I had to leave in the middle of class at times, and I was just like, yeah, this isn't going to work. So maybe in the future, I'm going to have a job that isn't so demanding. But right now, this job, I can actually feed my family. That's kind of nice.
Yep.
So I'm going to have to focus on this. So I stopped school, and I decided I'd go back to it later. And that was in, I think like 95 or 96, something like that. Probably
Okay.
96. Yeah.
Gotcha.
96,
So
97. Anyway, somewhere in there. so,
gotcha.
so then in 98, Terry left, and at that point, okay, so we were bought by LCI, or we were bought by Quest. No, we were bought by LCI, who was then bought by Quest. We're like two acquisitions in a row, and I was told at that point, yeah, this data center is going away. All of our stuff's in Virginia. Would you like to move to Virginia? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of the situation we were in. And and I put my resume out there on Monster, I think, actually. And I got some bites. I got Motorola in Florida, ExxonMobil in Dallas. I had like a large bank in the Carolinas, right? And I'm just like, wow, like that was quick. I
Was it
had
the Unix sysadmin? Was it?
all I
Yeah.
was at the time.
Yeah.
I was the Unix sysadmin. I knew a bunch of billing stuff, but they weren't telcos. So
Gotcha.
none of them were interested in my telco understanding. They're all just interested in my Unix experience and my experience with EMC storage, because it just so happened that we had an EMC array.
Yeah, and
That,
for anybody, I know a lot of people that are going to watch this are going to be IT people, but there's
right.
going to be people who aren't as well. So Unix is an operating system. It was created by Sun Microsystems, Solaris, or Solaris was a separate thing, but Unix is the operating system, and it was created and it was kind of the alternative, the only alternative at the time to Microsoft. If you've heard of Linux, Linux is Linus Torvalds non-Unix. He basically took that kernel and created an open source, free license operating system to rival Unix. But yeah, so Unix was
Yeah.
that a bad? Do you have a better explanation of that too?
No,
You
no,
want or
no.
add anything to it?
Yeah, I mean, basically, Unix is meant to be like a command line interface. Uh, it's not meant to be what Windows is. Windows is a
Of course,
GUI
yeah, I did,
driven,
yeah,
GUI driven,
yeah,
and Unix, although you can get a GUI with Unix, it's meant to be command line interface and much more business centric,
yep,
lots and lots of capability, extremely scalable. And then there's different variants of Unix based on the manufacturer. So HP has HPUX,
yep.
Sun Systems has SunOS, Solaris, right? Yeah, you have, IBM has AIX. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them,
Yep.
but the bottom line is that it's a more industrial strength operating system
Yep.
that is more command line driven, and so it
Without all the
requires,
frills and the
yeah,
graphical user interface and yeah, it's kind of more if anybody who knows Windows is where they came from, MS DOS, right? That's
right,
command line, and then they added all the
yeah.
pretty and the user experience around that. So
And there's tons of tools that come with it, come with Unix that are just kind of native to it,
mhm.
and I use those constantly,
Yep.
to take files and figure out, but pull things from them and select certain lines and select certain, things with certain text in them and manipulate that text and do all kinds of stuff, right? Awk
Sure.
and sped and grep and all kinds of things,
Great.
but yeah, I mean,
I've always loved that word grep. But
yeah,
anyways,
there's all this stuff you can do, but the bottom line was like EMC was a disk array manufacturer that they made the first integrated cache disk array, and so this, originally what they were doing was they were kind of like a cheaper version of IBM's disk, and then what they did was in memory too. You could get IBM compliant but cheaper memory, and then essentially, one of the founders came up with this idea of caching things before you send it to disk or before you read it from disk, and
yep.
caching your disk array. Although that's extremely common now, right? It's like what
Yeah, it
everybody.
seems common sense, right? But at the
Yeah,
time,
but
yeah,
that was not a thing
no,
before EMC. EMC is the one that put cache between, an operating system and disk, and said, well, we're gonna cache things using an algorithm that determines, what is more likely to be read, and then we'll allow people to write to cached memory, and then get a complete before we slower, destage to disk.
yeah,
And so we're kind of like improving the performance and the availability of the data with just a little bit of cost, a little bit of extra cost, and
Well, it's funny
that
because they repeated that whole value prop when Flash came around, right? It was
yeah, totally.
VNX,
Yeah,
intelligent tiering. I forget what they used to call it, but they'd have a Flash tier, so it goes to cache, and then it
yeah.
goes to Flash, and then hybrid arrays, and now we're at where everything's Flash and 3D NAND and et cetera. But yeah,
Well,
it's
so
funny.
the mobile oil and actually, so mobile oil wanted me for that.
Mhm.
Um, you know, what is it? Motorola, they really needed somebody who understood HPUX really well.
Okay.
And
And that
then,
was the flavor you were using. Was it all HPUX, or was there a mix?
well, no, I had I had MPE UX,
Gotcha.
which is kind of like it's like an HP database driven uh, um, Unix operating system. So
Gotcha.
but it's very database driven,
Yeah.
kind of like everything is around the database. But anyway, the point is and I had to decide like, well, what direction do I head? And two of these jobs were on the East Coast pretty much. And then you had one in Dallas, and I was in San Antonio. And so I'm like, well, that's not far away from family. And
Yep.
I like Dallas. I've been there a couple times. Like, why not? And so we went to Dallas, and I went to work for Mobile Oil.
Nice.
A couple years later, Exxon bought Mobil, and so I worked for Exxon Mobil for a short period of time, and then I left and went to work for a startup. But that whole time, like as soon as I started that sysadmin job, crazy busy, right? Just crazy busy. And then I was the only sysadmin at a company with a bunch of stuff. And back then, sysadmin, now they have like your storage folks, you have your networking people, you have security people, you have, in fact, sometimes even within systems, if you're when I went to Mobile Oil, it wasn't just like one person who covered systems.
Yeah.
They would have different people that covered different parts of system administration, and I was doing everything. Like I wore all the hats when I was at USLD. When I went to, oh, by the way, they also went into local exchange carrier. They became a competitive LEC, a CLEC.
Gotcha.
And since I knew the long distance billing system so well and how everything worked together, they said, we want you, in addition to being a sysadmin, we want you to help us with becoming a competitive LEC. And so I helped him install the billing system, the local billing system. I helped him do everything except for QA, but everything else I was just like,
Yeah.
doing all
Wearing
this.
all the hats again. That's
Yeah,
how you
wearing all
learn.
hats, man. Yeah, yeah, and I actually did some COBOL programming because they bought an old billing system that was still doing stuff in COBOL, and it was getting near Y2K, and they were just like they were all freaked out. So they hired some guy in his 60s to help with COBOL programming, and he couldn't do all the work, and so I was like, well, I've been doing it in school, so started doing some COBOL stuff too. But anyway,
Nice.
that's digressing. So I went to Mobile Oil, and they were in the middle of migrating everything to SAP for the express purpose of, well, okay. So think of it two different reasons. First one is they had tons of little distributed applications on all these different pieces of hardware, some of which were like desktop Unix sitting on a desk in the
Oh
data
no,
center, like
yeah.
literally sitting on a desk, and others were full on rack mount, very professional, that kind of thing. They had all this stuff, and they were like, "Yeah, we want to revamp what our IT infrastructure looks like, and at the
Yep.
same time prepare for Y2K." So they started into this project called Project Everest. This was started before I came there. I got there in '98. The goal was to finish before Y2K, before the year's death, which we did. We
Nice.
finished, and I spent the night with my wife in the Exxon Mobil data center over Y2K, over the year,
Were you
from
hoping you'd see some fireworks?
I mean, we were like, it was weird. It was like we all thought nothing's going to happen here. We've prepared, like we're all good, and we also were on edge.
Yeah.
Like, what if there's something we missed? What if something just like completely breaks and everything goes south? So,
Right.
uh, but I then like I left there and went to work for a couple of startups, both of which failed ultimately, and and I already told you a legal story about one of them, but I left the second one and went to work for this consulting company. And actually, they were looking for a CFO, and my old CEO at the company I just worked for was looking for a job, and I was like, "You really need to talk to him." And so they hired him as the CFO, and then I went to work for EMC, which is where I wanted to go. After that first startup, but it just takes a while to get hired on there. So I went to work for EMC. I worked for them for a few years, and then I covered telcos actually. So I covered Singular Wireless. That was one of the accounts I worked on. And then same sort of thing, right? Like, I'm like, how can I help my customer? Um, I was trying to get inside their head, like, what do they need and everything. And there were a couple things that I found. Like, first of all, there are performance issues that they really just didn't understand. Like, why are we having these performance issues? So I started pulling together experts, finding experts within the company, pulling them together. And I also just did a tremendous amount of study in the billing system to try to understand it. It was Amdocs, right? That's the billing system. And then the second thing that I wanted to do was not just understand the billing system, but understand how everything works together, because that was a problem I constantly found. I'd go to one group at Singular and I'd say, they were like, "Hey, we have a problem with this." And I'm like, "Well, what feeds data into that?" And I'm like, and they'd know a couple of things, but where does the data go after that? I don't know. I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. Tell me what you do know. And I started mapping it. And then I went to another group because it was like, oh, well, Citrix comes in here, but I don't even know exactly what they're doing. Okay, great. So I get a meeting with somebody on the Citrix team, and I'm like, hey, how does this work? Oh, well, here's what we do. And they explain everything they do. And I don't know what goes on over there. I'm like, no problem. I got that. And so I just went through and I figured out how all these pieces map together, of all these different teams. And then I documented all that, and I created all that, and I gave it to some of their lead troubleshooting folks, so people I have really good relationships with even today, and just said, hey, this is what I found. Is this useful? And they're like this is
like,
amazing. Like, you don't have any idea how many times we're troubleshooting stuff and we don't understand how things fit together. This helps us know who to contact, right? When we see something that we don't understand, and we know, like, there's some other group that's doing something here and it's messing us up, but who is that group? This really helps. So I saw a cleaned up version of that, they took that and they kind of pulled some of the stuff out that was, frankly, like, EMC centric, right?
Yeah, because
And they,
that's what you were thinking about at the time, right?
yeah, yeah, they pulled out some of that stuff, and then they took that, and I think like 2 weeks later or something, I'm walking around and I see this graphic and printed out on everybody's cube wall, and I was like, yeah, okay.
Well, it's
Yeah.
hilarious because it's like you accidentally did the job you would later do and now do, connecting
Right.
people and teams, and like that's the biggest thing about kind of our side of the world is we can't afford to be an expert in too many things because we have to know a lot about everything, and you kind of have to be able to see the big picture. So that's awesome, man, and that must have felt really good seeing
It
your
was
diagram up
fantastic.
there.
It
Yeah,
was fantastic.
yeah,
Even not even knowing the full impact, but just knowing that they valued it enough, right?
yeah.
That they would say everybody needs to use this as a point of
Or
reference. When we're
Well,
having a
and they
problem,
might have,
point to where
people
it
might
is.
have decided to put it up too. I mean, maybe they did pass it out there, but people will find a good piece of reference like that and they want to put it on their wall. You don't have to mandate it,
Yeah.
they want to do it for their job. And
Yep.
that's awesome, man.
So
That's a good one.
so then I through that process, I learned a lot about Amdocs, that EMC considered me an Amdocs expert, and so I started
Yeah.
going to all these Amdocs meetings all over the world with EMC, and Amdocs,
Mhm.
kind of figuring out, how we can work together to make the customer experience better, and all that. And that was really awesome. That actually is the reason I was able to take my wife to Paris for our 10th anniversary.
Very cool.
Right?
You
But
had
all this
like you had a
time,
meeting and you both went over and stayed the extra weekend kind of
yeah.
thing. Awesome. Yeah.
What's really funny is that was the year that France went to the World Cup.
Oh,
So
wow.
we didn't know that when we set all this up. We didn't know they were going to go to the World Cup. I mean, they hoped, right? But
Yeah.
we didn't know.
So you
So
just happen to be in town and like the biggest weekend ever.
yeah, so we're there, and we're like, we have our first meeting, and I think it was during our first meeting, or maybe it was that afternoon, that we figured out they're going to the World Cup. They're in the World Cup and that's what's happening. And so they pretty much told us, uh, Amdocs, all these people from Europe that were involved in this Amdocs experts group. They said, "Yeah, we're just letting you know we're not going to have any meetings for the rest of the week. I mean,
I
if
was
you
gonna
want,
say they're
we
probably like
can
you
show
filthy
up
Americans.
and
What are you?
pretend."
Yeah.
But no one is going to, they'll maybe be at your meeting for an hour, and then they'll be like, "Nope, I'm going to, hang out with the lads in a in a bar while, while then have a pint while the game is playing." So you're not gonna have any meetings. And I, of course, was just totally broken up by this because I had brought my wife with me.
Yeah.
So
Horrible.
I
What a
spent the
horrible
rest
fate.
of the week, with my wife, basically just enjoying France. And
That's
so
awesome.
it was fantastic.
Yeah, I
But
bet.
work paid for a lot of it because they paid for the trip ahead of time.
Yep.
And it was like, well, we're not paying a change, for the plane ticket. Like, we're not paying for that. You're just gonna have to
Yeah.
stay there. I'm like, okay, I'll suffer through it, but
Yeah, right.
anyway. So all this time I haven't done any schooling because, once
Yeah.
again, constant work, constant travel. I was like, I don't, and at the time, like, online school wasn't really a thing. And
No,
so,
yeah.
like, what do I do? So I didn't do anything. And then, I at some point, uh, I mean, just to put it kindly, management changed within EMC. They started traveling me like crazy and basically told me, because I told them, "You're going to get me divorced if you keep this travel up." And they said, "Well, divorce is a badge of honor here." And I hadn't heard that from anybody else at EMC, but I heard it from them, and I was just like, "Well, now I'm not traveling at all."
Yeah, wow.
Literally, I told the district sales manager. He said that divorce is a badge of honor. He's saying, like, "I'm not traveling at all for you anymore." In
Yeah.
fact, I haven't scheduled my travel for next week, and I'm not going to. I'm not coming to Atlanta again.
That's
You know,
horrible, man.
period.
Yeah.
Like, I'm done. Like, I
Oh,
don't know. I don't know who they thought I would value more, like the company or my family, but it wasn't the company.
yeah,
So,
I never understand. You hear mindsets like that. I remember there was a certain place I worked. I don't want to name them. It's too, too close to home, but someone actually told me, yeah, it's embedded in our management culture that we keep you uncomfortable. Like people sitting on tax, they keep shifting, right? Like we feel like that's the only way we get the value out of you. It's like
wow.
there's definitely some toxic management kind of
Yeah.
philosophies out there. There's some great management philosophies too, and I did 3 months of EMC as a partner exchange. We were a big
Oh,
EMC
yeah.
partner here in
Mhm.
Atlanta, so they sent me up to Hopkinton and me and another engineer, and we
Mhm.
worked with their teams and learned a ton. And it was a great company in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. I think it was
I loved
a
it.
lot different at that
Yeah.
point, but
It
that's the
was
thing
just that
too.
one team. It was just
Yeah,
that
the
one
wrong
team.
management.
I've worked with so many people at EMC over so many years, and like I said, I love them, love them. But at any company, you're going to run into people that, are, like you said, are toxic. And
Yeah.
I learned that, I don't know. I think that was one of my first experiences with being willing to just go, "I'm out."
Yeah.
And even though I had nothing to go to, by the way, I had nothing to
Yep.
go to. And they almost immediately said, had me show up for a meeting with HR, and
Yep.
they laid me off. They laid me off. I mean, they gave me a
Oh,
nice
did
package.
they? So,
Oh,
so
yeah. Oh, yeah.
did they give you a PIP or anything first, a performance
Oh, no,
improvement
no.
plan, or okay, so just
No,
straight.
no,
How
no.
long are we
That
talking? Are
would
we
have been
talking two
very
weeks?
bad for them. That would have been
Yeah,
very bad for them. Like, "You're going to put me on plan because I don't want to sacrifice my family." Really?
yeah. How quick did they lay you off? How quick was it from the time you told them I'm not traveling
But
anymore
it
to
was less than a month. I think it was like
wow,
2 weeks, probably. Yeah, it was pretty fast. Um,
wow.
and by the way, that sent shockwaves through the SE community in Dallas. Like, I had tons of people, including SE managers, calling me up, going, "Everybody's freaked out."
They let
That
you go?
yeah, that they well, that they it wasn't that, like, oh, you're amazing. No, it was more like, that it came down to, me saying, you're impacting my family and my marriage, and them going, I don't care. Like, you
Yeah.
have to sacrifice your marriage for us. And that was enough that everybody was like, well, what the heck? Like, I'm not going to sacrifice my marriage. You're going to lay me off,
Yeah.
And so everybody was kind of freaking out. But whatever. I kind of want to name his name, but I won't. Anyway, the district sales
Good
agent
idea.
said that, and
Yeah,
the
good
and the,
idea. You
and
can
the
tell me later. Who knows?
sales guy who, oh my gosh. Anyway, okay. Anyway, so I was like, well, you know, um, I have a ton of, like, not just architect experience, but hands-on. I
Yeah.
still have hands-on. So I'm going to do some consulting. And so I went to some friends of mine that I had worked at in the past at the startups, and I said, hey, I at the time had a few months of severance. Like, they paid for that paid for several months. So I was like, well, in the meantime, I'm going to try to get a consulting business started. So I did, and I ended up being able to 1099, hire a few other folks, and I guess I got some business, I got some interest and some contracts. And the next thing you know, I was doing a ton of consulting business and able to support my family. I was doing some travel, but not a lot, just a little bit, and then one of those companies, offered to hire me um, a few times, and the last offer was like, okay, so
Yeah.
I have a choice to make. I'm at this inflection point where I can only go so fast because the advisory stuff I have to deliver,
Yeah.
the hands-on implementation stuff or changes or whatever they need done. Like, I have a group of 1099 folks I can use based on availability. But the problem is I end up getting pulled out of town sometimes for the advisory strategic kind of things, kind of engagements. And it's hard to build sales pipeline
Yeah.
when I'm doing that. So I had these ebbs and flows like that. And the only way to stabilize that was actually hire a salesperson
Yep.
and have a salesperson go, um, continue to farm the relationships that I had, but also start building new relationships and growing the business. So I'm like, well, do I want to do that? Do I want to hire a bookkeeper because I'm doing my own bookkeeping at night? Do I want to hire a bookkeeper? Do I want to hire a salesperson? What do I want to do here?
Yeah.
And that was this jump. That was this inflection point of growth with a small consultancy. And at the time, I was offered enough from the company that I ended up working for that I was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to take that, and maybe in the future I'll look at doing a consultancy again. But it's a big enough gamble, and at the time I had a few kids, at like four or so. No, five. Yeah,
Yeah.
five. So I had five kids at the time. Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much I'm willing to risk, and so I went ahead and just went with the salary. Um, and that was with a consulting company, and then that got me into Forsyth. I worked 6.5 years at Forsyth as a principal consultant,
Gotcha.
doing a variety of things. Once again, too busy to do any schoolwork. No way.
Yeah.
Just constantly traveling, working all times of the day and night. Then I went to work for EMC again. This time as a V specialist,
Yep.
focused on cloud. um Hybrid cloud, not multi-cloud at the time. There's no such thing, but
Yeah.
hybrid cloud, private
Which
cloud.
year? What year are we about at now?
This
So,
is 2012. So
okay.
2012, I went to work for EMC for a second time,
Mm.
and then and ultimately loved what I was doing, working with the partner community, helping them to build cloud offerings into their existing offerings.
Yeah.
So and
Dude, we were one of those, by the way. That was around the
oh yeah,
time. Yeah, Abacus Solutions in Atlanta, Georgia.
nice.
We
Yeah.
had an I-Series AS400 cloud that was supported by a Wintel side with VNX and
Yeah,
VMware,
cool.
and You literally could have been my SE at the time, where I
Yeah.
was, helping out with that. That's
Well, I was
hilarious.
doing a lot of like at the time I was focused on SAP HANA Enterprise Cloud
Yep.
and partners that had you know or wanted a HANA Enterprise Cloud to offer to their customers. And
Hmm.
so, and SAP was like, hey, any partner that wants to do this, and you have various consultancies that offer this, and they have like, specific areas that they're really good in. Like they're really good in automotive. So SAP Automotive, they
Sure.
know it really, really well, and so they'll offer a bunch of managed services and consulting and all that kind of stuff around automotive SAP. But then they also offered HANA Enterprise Cloud through us because we're the ones who created the offering with them, right? So it's kind of cool.
Gotcha.
But
Yep.
I had a buddy of mine who worked at CenturyLink, who now CenturyLink was now AT&T Wireless,
Yep.
right? AT&T bought CenturyLink, or no, CenturyLink bought AT&T, but kept the AT&T name. It's
Yeah.
AT&T Wireless. So so now this buddy at AT&T Wireless, he was creating a group for the CIO that was just meant to focus on these 8 different clouds that they had internally and figuring out a way to, because they were all doing their own little things, they all had their own operations, their own support, their own technology stack, their own architectures, and finding a way to kind of get them pointed roughly the same direction over the course of the next few years. There's a 2-year contract, but they were like, just start this going the right direction. We want to start converging their technology decisions to a point where we can have one operations team, one support team, right?
Yep.
And we have a combined technology direction and technology stack. And so we started that and made quite a bit of progress over a couple of years. But um, that was the time that I started thinking about, maybe I ought to get my degree. And the reason was because when I was at Forsyth, I left Forsyth in 2012.
Yep.
I put my resume out there. I had like a ton of experience and a lot of consulting experience, right? Advisory consulting experience. And I got several recruiters that basically said, uh, "You're a great candidate for a CTO role or a CIO role."
Yep.
And so, and so I applied for those positions, and I got to a point with 2 or 3 of them, where they said, "Hey, we're thinking about making you an offer, like, or my client is thinking about making you an offer. They want to know if you're willing to get your MBA because, with that kind of a position, you're going to be on their web page, in the about us kind of thing, like."
Yep.
The CIO is going to be up there and visible. So would you be willing? I mean, we'll pay for they say they'll pay for your MBA if you're willing to do it. And I was like, well, um, yeah, as long as they can wait for me to get my bachelor's first.
Yep.
And literally they all said the same thing, like, oh,
You're like,
you don't
what?
have your bachelor. We just assumed you had it and hadn't put it in LinkedIn.
Yeah.
We can't, there's no way. There's no way they'll do that. And I said,
Wow.
well, ask them and see what they say. Just tell them, I have tons of experience, and
Yep.
I'll get my bachelor's. I'm not that far away. And they all came back, no, you got to have your bachelor's at the very least.
Hmm.
So that was really in 2012. That was really where I started thinking, like, I've got to get my degree. Like I made the decision, and I'm totally behind it. Like at the time, it did make the most sense for me. I think I've put off getting my degree too long. I just need to hurry up and get it.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, EMC, very, very busy job as a V specialist. One of the best organizations I've worked in, by the way, Chad Sakic's organization.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
No, I remember V specialists. Always awesome guys. Yeah.
Unbelievable. And then at AT&T, I had time. So at AT&T, they were paying me by the hour. I was a contractor, right? I was working for my own company, and so there was like, you work 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, no travel, nothing after hours. You are advisory in nature. You're strategic in nature. They call me a cloud strategist, right? It's like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You only work during business hours. So for the first time, I think almost ever in my career, I had a job that I could like take the train in the morning, because I knew that 5 p.m. I'm just going to jump on the train and head back. There's no chance of me working late, right? And missing when the trains go. So yeah, I had like an eight to five Monday through Friday job. So what did I do? I looked up, I started looking, hey, what can I do? What job or what universities? And I found University of Phoenix. I found maybe one other, but it wasn't that great. And so I ended up like University of Phoenix would accept all of the different credits that I had from all those different colleges and universities that I had taken, so or that I had attended. So they took it all, and then they allowed me to do a degree plan that only took a few years. So
Yep.
over the course of several years, I went to school part-time, worked full-time,
Nice.
and I finished my degree in uh 2020.
Oh wow. Okay.
Right? So
So you started what around 2017, or was it even longer than that?
2015, it was about
Okay.
2015 to 2020. It took me about
So
5 years.
so going real slow, part time, not too
Yeah.
many credits, like very manageable, still dealing with your family, and
Just one class at a time is the way
good
that
for you.
university works. And there were
Yeah.
sometimes where I had to take breaks, because it was
Yeah.
like I had a trip set up to go, overseas for several weeks for EMC, because I ended up going back to EMC again later on. From AT&T, I went to Microsoft. I worked there for a while. Then I went back to EMC, or which was Dell then. So then it was Dell EMC.
Yep.
And then I came to Sirius and now CDW, like CDW bought Sirius. But
When you went real quick, when you went back to Dell EMC,
yeah,
what was your role then? Were you, because it wouldn't have been V
question.
specialist anymore?
No, oh yeah, yeah, technically, but they didn't call it V specialist
That's what
anymore.
I
They
meant.
called them like cloud. What was that called? Cloud technology. Anyway,
Gotcha.
it was the V specialist org. They just called it something else. But
Yeah.
what I was what I was asked to do then was to be the first pre-sales person for Azure Stack. You know
Oh,
what Azure
cool.
Stack is?
I do. I do
Okay.
actually just got an ask to set one up recently to set up Azure Stack on prem.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've done
Yep.
that. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
we can do that one together. I was thinking about bringing you in on it since it is on prem, and kind
yeah,
of
sure.
it's a good story of why because my guys were like, we could do it, but we're kind of stretched right now. I'm like, you don't want to do it because it's in a data center and it's not
Now, is
Azure
it
proper.
is it Azure Stack HCI or is it
We haven't
a
got that
flat?
far yet. I'm
Okay,
talking to them
okay.
soon,
Because Azure
but
Stack
yeah,
HCI is not Azure Stack. They're just calling
yeah,
it that, but it's
yeah.
not really. Okay, anyway, so
Gotcha. We'll
I
get
I
into it
was
though. I just heard about it this week, so we got a meeting coming. I'll get it over to you. We'll get into it.
oh, that's cool. That's cool. So I was nearing the end of my 2-year contract with AT&T, and basically, um, Microsoft, a recruiter from Microsoft, contacted me because one of the guys on my team, I think he no, I don't think he had worked for Microsoft, but it was like his dream. It was like his dream job.
Okay.
Great guy, by the way.
Yeah.
His name's Sean. So anyway, Sean got a job over at Microsoft and was just like, "This is amazing. Jeremy, you have to come join us." And I was like, "I don't know. Think about it. Like, I don't know if they're going to renew my contract because at the time there was all sorts of unrest going on within AT&T, a bunch of organizational change, and it was
Sure.
causing problems with anybody who's a contractor. So anyway,
Sure.
yeah. So they called me, and I was like, yeah, I'll interview for a role, And so I went down. They wanted me to be a cloud architect, right?
Yep.
Cloud solution architect. So
But Azure Stack specifically, or
no,
okay,
no,
all right,
no. This was Microsoft, right? So they just wanted an Azure cloud architect. Yeah,
okay,
cloud solution architect. So CSA is what they call them. So I go in and we have this conversation, and I do a bunch of technical interviews. I mean, I do a sales interview, then I with a sales manager, I do a bunch of technical interviews, and then basically we're finishing up the technical interviews. They're asking me a lot of questions. I'm whiteboarding, it's a lot of fun, and they're like, "Well, look, I'm just telling you right now, we're probably going to offer you a job, but any questions you have for us?" And I was like, "Well, okay. So let me think about that." I said, "Do you mind if I use my laptop?" And they said, "Sure." So I pull out my Chromebook, right?
yeah,
My Google Chromebook.
nice. Very nice.
But I had put over the Acer sticker, I had put like a one of those Apple logos you get with like an iPod or whatever, an iPad, you know. So I put one of those on there. I popped that open,
So
and
it's
they
like
just
a
fell out
double
laughing.
insult. Yeah.
Yeah, they just fell out laughing, and they were like, "Do you have Windows on that?" And I was like, "Windows? That's way too fat. No, no, no. I have
Yeah.
Linux on this.
Yeah.
I have Ubuntu.
That's
There's no way I'm
awesome.
running Windows on this." And they
Right.
just fell out again. They're like, they were like, "Do you really want this job?" And I said, "Yeah, but you have to understand that I don't want to work for the Windows cloud."
Yeah.
My
Exactly.
question is this the Windows cloud? Is this all about Microsoft? And Microsoft rules everything. And Microsoft's the center of the universe. And if you don't believe it,
Yeah.
then we're not going to talk to you. We're only going to talk to people who believe Microsoft is everything. I'm like, no, 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 no.
No.
We have Linux running, and they started defending like, hey, no, we do care about more than just Windows. And they honestly do, especially with Satya.
Yeah.
His leadership has been really transformational to the way that Microsoft works with their customers and their partners. And it's definitely a healthier Microsoft, not just for the customers, but also the entire ecosystem. The whole technology ecosystem works better
Yeah.
because of the way that they're willing to reach out to, integrating technologies that are honestly competitive to what they do, but
Yeah.
ultimately, when they do that, they do the right thing for the customer. The customer recognizes it, and there's
Yep.
a much better relationship. So when I started
100%.
talking through that, and then I asked them like, "What are you doing in data really? Like, what are you really doing?" Because one of the problems that you have with these cloud vendors, all three of them, by the way, the hyperscalers,
Hmm.
all three of them say the same thing. Well, we're leaps and bounds beyond everyone when it comes to data science. Oh, we're just leaps and bounds. But did you see our latest announcements at whatever conference? And they what's funny is when you unpack those, it's like, yeah, but at the last conference, your competitor said the same thing. The other two competitors at their previous conferences, you're all about the same area. You're all in about the same place.
Yep.
You're all racing, but you're doing like little micro steps ahead of each other. And then the other person's catching up. And then you do a little micro step and the other person catches up. And it's not always the same person in the lead, depending on what area of
Sure.
AI or data or whatever. But when you talk about like just basic fundamental cloud, AWS is in front of everyone.
Yeah. Especially from a scale services. I mean, their architecture.
The way they
Yeah.
cost things, the way that yeah, and
Yep.
you see
Just the basics.
Microsoft and
The
Google kind
other
of
two.
lagging behind, like trying
Yeah.
to keep up in that area. So when you talk about the fundamentals,
Hmm.
AWS is ahead. When you talk about like the data stuff, all those the data science related, business intelligence
Yeah.
related services, like yeah, they're all basically roughly the same. They all have little nuanced things that they're especially
Yes.
good at that the other isn't
Yep.
quite as good at, but even that changes over time. So anyway, so I'm working for this company and I'm loving the technology, loving the people that I'm working with. And my boss is just horrific to work for and I mean, it was literally abusive. So I at some point I was just like, yeah, I need to look around and what do you know?
That's
What's
Go
that?
ahead.
Oh,
Finish your
what
thought.
so one of my friends, my old V specialist buddies in the office of the CTO at Dell, he sends me a LinkedIn message like, "Hey, how you enjoying Microsoft?" Right? Just happens to do it this one day
When
where
you
I'm
were
just
just done.
uh, like I have to find a way into a different position at Microsoft out from underneath this guy. This is killing me.
Yeah.
And I start this conversation, the guy named Jace, great guy, like great guy. And we start talking about this position where for this product and technical preview, right, called Azure Stack, right? Hadn't been released yet. So technical preview, and he's like, we don't even have a pre-sales organization built. We have an engineering organization. We have one person in marketing. Like we're just beginning to build this organization within Dell around Azure Stack, and we think we have a really good product, but everything's in technical preview, and we haven't really prepared to talk to sales teams and talk to customers. We need somebody who like really knows how to do the messaging, understands all the technology. So it's kind of like that, I can do marketing stuff, I can do technology stuff, like I can have all those conversations, I can have executive conversations, and we need somebody like that. That's you. So would you be interested in working for us and leading that? And that led to me being the chief technology strategist for Azure Stack at Dell, basically leading a portion of the pre-sales organization, V-specialist organization, just focused on Azure Stack, educating the sales field, educating the technical sales field, educating customers, sometimes micromanaging installations, and
You have to do that in any,
oh my gosh.
yeah, in any new endeavor, you kind of have to. I'm living that right now in public sector with TV. It's just, yeah, they're too small for my time and my attention, but you got to make sure they go well, because those are your foundational wins, and it sets the tone for everything else you're trying to do. So
that's right. It leads to the next and the next. And the other thing was really interesting about that was they said, like, this is your area, you're technical pre-sales. And then I'd say, okay, so what marketing events are you doing? And like, we only have one we have one marketing person. So they're just trying to get like our PowerPoint slides created, and that could, like, they don't have time to go do all these events. They want to do one or two a year, maybe. I was like, no. And like HPE is going to eat our lunch if we do that. They are so focused on marketing and not focused on the engineering, right? Like, they're paying so much more money to engineering or to marketing than they are to engineering. They're going to eclipse us in sales, even if their product is inferior. We spend way more money in engineering and hardly anything on marketing, but that's not going to help us. Like, so who cares if Betamax is a superior technology?
Yep.
Right? The fact is, you don't have the marketing engine. You just lost all that business. So I said, well, you know what? Like, the V specialists can help. So let's talk this through. And then they're like, well, we have a limited engineering organization, and we have all these customers that want to do new and interesting things, but we don't have time to sit there and vet all that out and come up with what that would look like and figure out how to test it and maybe put it through tests in a lab and coordinate with other IT vendors to create a holistic solution. We don't have the time to do all that. We can do that. We will help. We don't have time to like go speak at events and all that kind of stuff. We can do that. By the way, we'll also help with all the pre-sales stuff. We don't have time to educate everybody. We will over the next 2 years. And we're like, nope, we'll get it done in a few months, right? And so what I did was I took, 20 something V specialists, and I let them self-select into groups, right? And there were a couple of places where I was like, hey, you said you were interested in one of these two things and you picked this one, but we're shy in this one. Can you move over? Right. So I had to rebalance a little, but they all self-selected into groups, and they even self-selected as owners of each individual thing. So I had people who were focused on, engineering and innovation. I had people that were running a team of e-specialists just focused on training and enablement, right? Somebody focused on, all the marketing stuff and getting all the material right and who's going to speak at conferences where and arranging all that kind of thing. And then, anyway, so we grouped them, and then we just sat there and like we'd have a meeting, once every 2 weeks. And then otherwise I just kept tabs on things, and then I would just go wherever was needed to meet with sales leadership, meet with large customers and all that kind of stuff. And so that was a fantastic role that I absolutely loved.
Yeah. Sounds like it. You sound stoked about it. And frankly, I can see why. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very entrepreneurial because it's like a startup, but a very well-funded, safe startup. And so it was just a blast.
How long was that from start to finish, going back to Microsoft for Azure Stack back to Dell for Azure Stack? How long was that period till you feel like you kind of had it all up and spinning?
Oh, so I had it up and spinning. That was probably 4 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Probably
That's a lot to do.
It was, but we had V specialist team are fantastic. Like they all had the same kind of mantra, volunteering, lots of hard work, yeah, it's a fantastic team. I'm still in touch with all of them today. Like,
It's
we're
awesome.
on chat, we're on different channels, Discord and others. And yeah, so we still keep in touch and I still ask them questions and,
Sure.
all working for different companies, all different things, but we still keep in touch. Like I said, Chad Sakic built an amazing culture and,
Yeah.
and we still, we'll talk about what a great time that was. But ultimately, I ended up getting my degree like in 2020, and I was working for Dell at that time,
Yep.
and as I was getting my bachelor's degree, just before I got it, I was like, I really should. I have this like, work, family, school, church, like all this stuff. I have this balance figured out, right? So if I'm ever going to get my MBA, and I remembered back 2012, like that's one of the things. Man, if you only had your degree, we'd have you go and get your MBA. I'm like, do I really want to like go get a job and then have them go, oh yeah, you need to go get your MBA?
Yeah.
I've already got the balance figured out. Let's go get the MBA. So that's what
Nice.
I did. So I just went
Yep.
back to school. I got my MBA. 2022, I graduated. And
Nice.
so, I guess for listeners, right? It's like in the technology field, not everywhere. Can't
Yeah.
do this in
Not
medicine.
everywhere.
Can't do it in medicine, right? You can't be like,
Law.
yeah, but I know
Can't even do it
everything
as a
about being
teacher.
a nurse. I don't care.
Nope.
You're not
You
an
can't.
RN,
Yeah.
you know? Yeah. So yeah, in technology, oftentimes, experience means more. Sorry, there's a dog outside. But
It's okay.
anyway, in technology, oftentimes experience, hands-on experience means more than a degree or sometimes even certifications. Although certifications are important,
Yep.
it's not the same as experience when it comes to a technology field.
Totally. But there's it sounds like the moral of that story is there is a ceiling to it. And
There is.
it's funny because now I think where we are now, even if you hadn't have done it, it wouldn't affect you. You'd still be in the awesome job, killing it the way you are. But
Just like you are.
yeah, yeah, like me, right? So for anybody who I haven't
Keep
mentioned it
killing
on
it.
here, I'm killing it, and I haven't finished my degree either. I was in school when a VP and an owner of a local VAR found me with my part-time job and convinced me to work for him full time, and did that for a couple of years, and then I've worked my way up now, going on 12 or 13 years. But yeah, it's there's definitely a ceiling. It's something I've been looking into. And when I found out actually you can get your MBA without doing a bachelor's if you do it
I
right,
didn't
I
know
was
that.
like,
I didn't know
that might be the
that.
move. You got to pass some tests and
Jump right to it,
yeah, yeah,
right?
exactly, right. And it's funny because like I don't know about you, but I wasn't, and maybe when you first did it, you weren't, but maybe you were better the second time, and I probably would be too. I think for me, it was just like I was never someone who could sit still in a classroom and just like do the 100 problems. And like you give me one really good problem, and once I get it, I'm kind of like I got it. Like why am I going to do those other 99? And it's sad too because my wife's the exact opposite. Banged out her master's in like a year or something, a year
No, an
and like a
MBA
quarter.
is very much like this. An MBA
Yeah,
is not do the problem 100 times. The MBA is
good.
absolutely, here's a situation, right?
Mhm.
What should this company do? And
Nice.
you have to take what you've been learning in class and sometimes what you've learned from previous classes, right? And like in that program
Yep.
and come up with a solution and present it to the class. And oftentimes you're working as a team, you're working as a
Yep.
group. And at least in our program, they paired people very purposefully. So they'd say, well, Jeremy doesn't have a finance background or an accounting background, but Lance does, and so Lance is going to be a member of Jeremy's, going to be on the same team Jeremy's on because he can round them out that way. And Jeremy and Lance don't have a marketing background, but this Kimber does. So we're going to take Kimber and put her in that same team,
Yep.
and it was kind of like that, right? And so they kind of purposefully put us together and then change the groups for other classes and for other projects. And it was really great. I learned so much in my
Where'd you
MBA.
do it at? Where was your MBA from?
BYU. Yeah.
Okay,
BYU.
nice.
So, I got both of my degrees in business because I thought, I had people asking like, why aren't you doing a computer science or, whatever. And it's like, yeah,
I've been doing
because
that forever.
I've already been to school when I was younger around computer science. And I already learned then that they aren't current. Like it's very difficult for a university to stay current because think about it. They have to take whatever is current and then they have to create lesson plans. They have to create curriculum, right?
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. And then the teacher, the instructor or the professor or whatever, then has to offer the class and it has to have enough people want to take it.
Yep.
So, and for them to want to take it, it has to be something that they know about and have interest in. Well, by the time all that happens,
It's already too
as
late.
fast as technology goes, like, well, that's what we were doing 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
the other
not
problem, the other
today.
major problem is how do you know what's going to stick, right? How many technologies come and go that at the
Yeah.
time are like the hottest thing, right? I remember when containers first started being a big
Oh
conversation,
yeah.
and I'm like, oh, I get it, but we'll see. Like,
Yeah.
will that take off, or will people sit in VMware and bare metal and ignore it? And now it's as common as VMs were 10 years ago. But that could have gone to the wayside, like plenty of other things did, right? I'm still waiting to see if hardware as a service will make it, like HP
Does some of that.
GreenLake, and there's places for it, right? But like,
Yeah.
I've had people ask me about it, and it's like, I don't know, it's one of those things that you thought when it came out, it's like, oh, that's going to be the answer for the folks that don't like cloud. And now
Yeah.
you see even federal and state and local where they're like, no, we like cloud and we're figuring it out. And so it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, is that hardware thing gonna last? And it would probably always will because you have air gapped and you have, has to be in this building and whatnot. But
There's a lot of problems actually that require on-prem hardware.
yeah,
You know,
there
not
is.
even just security reasons, but like I think about some of the state and local governments that I work with sometimes, and they just say, well, this application is what we use to process all of our tax revenue. It
Yep,
was written on mainframe by people who have long since died,
yep.
and the company is gone and has been for like a decade or more. So we don't really know how we're going to get off of this. We could take a current version of something like that, right? A current
Yeah,
tax, processing software and everything, but I've seen them try. I'm not going to
yeah,
say which state government, state local
sure.
government did it, but I've seen them try and say and have like millions of dollars in a project and spend the millions of dollars to try to move everything over to an open system that they could
Yeah,
then either it's virtualized or it's in cloud, whatever, but it's open systems now. I'm
yeah.
telling you, it failed.
Well, think about the number of tax
Definitely failed.
returns. Yeah, I mean, how do
Yeah,
you
they just
even
like,
if you can translate that data, the scope of it, and
yeah.
it's that doesn't surprise me at all, really,
Oh, and
that
it
it
was
would.
written in a time when it wasn't like it was written in a time when developers were thinking about efficiency of code more than about ease of understanding for someone
Yeah,
else to come in and look at their code and figure out what they were doing. That's
yeah,
not what they were thinking about. They were thinking like, I have to fit this into the smallest space possible because storage is so expensive and memory
yep,
is so expensive, and so
yep,
it was this oftentimes cryptic, the way that the software worked, but it was all meant, for a single purpose, and that certainly was not making it easy for other developers to understand. And so
oh
you
yeah,
get in there and it's just like, oh my gosh, this is a rat's nest,
yeah,
but it got the job done and it got it
yep,
done at a very low performance requirement and a very low storage requirement.
yep,
So it's like they did what they said they needed to do, right? Like they did it,
yep.
and now you have what you have. Good
Yeah,
luck.
well, and they didn't have 100 years of people building things like that and it failing. Where like now we have DevOps practices and we've
Oh,
learned, and people comment out everything. It's like you look at a piece of code now for the simplest thing, and it's got more comments than
And
any
code.
YouTube video will ever have, right? Like,
Yeah.
people spend as
Yeah.
much time breaking down how the code works and the instructions as they do writing it sometimes.
Well, that's
Plus, they
today's
didn't have the
market.
modularity. Everything was custom. It was from scratch. It's like, I mean, not everything, but you know what I mean? And some of it,
Yeah.
to your point, so efficient, it was like magic. So even if you knew that coding language and could parse what they had done, you're like, I don't know how that actually works. Like, why is that working? What am I
Right.
missing here? But it
Yeah.
works. Okay.
We're learning different things these days, right? And we kind of skip steps because of where we are
Yeah.
technologically. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that's the degree story, right? Is and I like I like the lessons that we've kind of learned out of that, which is
Yeah.
degrees can be useful, and certainly education in general is useful. I also got tons of certs. I didn't stop learning that whole time. I was constantly doing technical training, constantly getting certifications.
Yeah.
I was always looking outside of what my responsibilities were for my job. And I've never had the idea, this is not my job. I've always had that, kind of entrepreneurial mindset of like, what is the end goal? What are we here to do as a company? What are we here to do as a sales team or a consulting team? What is our customer here to do? What do their customers expect of them?
Yep.
Right? How can I help them make their customers happy, and fulfill the needs of their customers? How do I do that? And so a lot of times that means thinking outside of your own job,
Totally.
and that's why I think you and I are really good at what we do, because we can tell sales teams it doesn't matter if you think it belongs in my little organization within CDW, right?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be within DV. It doesn't have to be within DCT. Like, stop thinking about that.
Yep.
Start thinking about what is the outcome your customer wants. Do you think there's advisory services needed? If so, just come to me.
Yep.
And I right now I'm helping, with some advisory services with a higher ed that needs network consolidation, and a little bit of security stuff. That's not my area,
Yeah.
but they know they can come to me, and then I'm like, okay, here's who you need to get involved on the network side, the security side. Like, get those folks involved. Let's come together and let's see if
Yeah.
we can't, and you and I, right? The way we work is like anytime somebody comes to either one of us and says,
Yeah.
hey, do you do this, or do you know who does? We're like, let's assemble the team. And
Yep.
then you and I talk and we're like, okay, who are we bringing together? Let's
Yep.
get the right team together and let's get a full, a full solution for our customer, and not cut corners because it's not my job.
Well, that's really the thing. And for people who are listening, like what we're talking about, we have so many departments within CDW that come from acquisitions, or there's reasons why, and they are what they are, and then they own certain things. So when this technology or that problem comes up, it's like, oh, that's that team, and it's like, yeah, but there's probably pieces of that that are adjacent that should go to other teams, and the customer gets a better experience if you have Jeremy from DCT and Corey from DV and this guy from DI security and this guy from. So it's all about that collaboration, and more importantly, when one starts bringing to the other and then to another, it's like everybody starts working together. We all get a better outcome. We all get more sticky with the customer. We get into better conversations. It's really key. I wanted to back up for a second though.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of what I've done in the last 10 years with people who, because I'll meet people, especially like you said, doing well at what I do at a young age. People ask me, oh, what do you do and how'd you get into it? How could I get into it? Right. And I have my answer for that, but I'll have plenty of time
Right.
to do that. So I'd be interested to see, you mentioned certifications, right? You mentioned
Yeah.
maybe school isn't the right answer for everybody. And I think that's a key part of it. There are certain people who it's like, you should go get some experience, even if it's not going to be in IT, whatever you're looking at, go do some work. If you've been out of high school and you don't feel like you're going to go kill it at college and you're not going to put the work in, go do some work, and then either figure out that you don't want to do that yet and then you will put the work in, or go get some experience and go back when it's appropriate. Because I think you doing all those certs probably taught you how to learn more structured and faster, although you were always good at it from what you've said. But what would be your advice to someone who's totally cold? They don't have someone in it, right? let's say I got a cousin who's their dad's a general contractor, their mom's a nurse, and they're like, I like computers, but I don't even know where to start, and I don't know what the job would be like. Break that down for me, in as
Yeah.
whatever detail level you want.
So I can give you an example. One of my sons, well, actually, I have two sons in technology right now, right? And so one of them said, I want to do, something in technology, but I'm not exactly sure what. And so, what should I do? And ultimately, they were like, I want to make money like you do, and I want to do. And I have so many of their friends too. I work with the youth oftentimes, and in our
Yep.
church and everything. And I get the same thing. How can I get your job? How can I do your job? And I'm like, well, you pay a lot of dues.
Yep.
You
It's
you
gonna be
start
hard.
out you start out in a crap job,
Mhm.
but you have a vision of where you're going to go, right?
That's
And
huge.
so if you have an idea of in general with technology, because technology now is like so robust, there's so many things you could do, and
Yep.
get a fantastic living in one little bitty thing.
Yep.
You've seen some of the AI jobs right now that are just ridiculous. What is it, prompt program or something like 250 grand a year. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, there's so many different things. And so, one of my sons asked me that. I was like, well, the uh, it depends on what you want to do.
Yep.
So do you prefer engineering where you're like working with hardware, like hardware engineering, where you're working with hardware, you're making things function. It might be a little bit of coding, it might be some engineering like physics. I mean, there might be all sorts of sciencey things in there. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Because I mean, what Honeywell, I mean, there's like tons of companies you can work for and do that kind of thing, right? I
Yep.
mean, all the
Yep.
major hardware manufacturers, so
and
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 working
and
on
great for people who aren't
Cisco and,
people, right?
yeah,
So there's
yeah,
there's thing people and there's people, and
right,
some people you can be a technology person and be both, but some people need
right.
that direction of yeah, you don't want to do what I do. Like we deal with people all the day. There's a like, and people hear sales and it's a dirty word. So that's a good call out there on
Yeah,
that side.
yeah. So just kind of figuring out like, what do you like doing with your time?
Hmm.
If you had to work, like, what would you like to do in technology? Like, let's say they say, I like science, I like math. I think I'd be good with, I'm good with computers. I think I'd be good in this field. And it's like, well, okay. Um, there's a couple things you can do to start. Like, the first thing is, why don't you get a entry level job and you could do help desk?
Yep.
You're
Good
dealing
idea.
with customers, which you're probably going to do unless you're in back of the house engineering. If you want to do something like back of the house engineering and not deal with people, go to
Yep.
school and get an engineering degree
Yep.
because
Or do
you're
or
going to need
do
it.
a ton of really key, talk to someone like you or me, find out what key certs you could go get in 6 months, and then go get a start and entry level job in the back of house
Right.
engineering side. Okay, and then
Oftentimes for engineering jobs, like if you wanted to
it's
go to
hard.
Dell and create the new, what the next version of a disk array or a network switch or a I don't know, like an IoT device or a server or whatever, like you're going to have to get an engineering degree. You have to have paper with that kind of
Yeah.
job. But if
Yeah.
you're dealing with people, then okay, well, just go get a help desk job. That's essentially what I got. Go
Yep.
get a help desk job, and then start figuring out what you like working with,
Yep.
and then you start down a path now, and you could just start learning, and then go figure out what technology you enjoy. How do you do that? There's a lot of free training online.
Yep.
None of it will turn into actual like certifications immediately, but
True.
it's like a way to learn. So if you're thinking, well, maybe I'm interested in cloud, there's a bunch of free cloud training online. You
Oh
have to
yeah.
pay for the cert, but you have to pay for the cert, but you can get the cloud training for free. So go
Yep.
take some cloud training classes and see if it like totally turns you off or if you're like, yeah, I actually like this,
Yeah.
right? So it's some of that stuff, and then uh, sorry, for the dog.
Pupper.
One of the one of the things that we do, which maybe is not for everybody, is understanding technology enough and then learning how to communicate properly. So
Yep.
learning how to communicate properly is a big part of our job because we're dealing with, marketing people, we're dealing with executives, we're dealing with technology people. We have to learn how to communicate in different ways.
Yep.
We have to understand how to use slides, how to work over a web conference. What do we do in person? Taking social cues and understanding what those mean.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Big
Understand.
time.
Some of it is like figuring out strategies for communication that can yield some pretty surprising results. Like, for example, uh, one of the things that I learned as a consultant was being comfortable with silence. So I would have an interview or a workshop with people, and I would ask a question, and I would tell everybody on my team too, like, if I have a question, if I have to ask a question and they don't answer, like, just be quiet. Just
Yep.
wait until I speak again. And there's a reason behind this. So I do, and oftentimes they can't handle it. And so, the client will just sit there and they won't answer for a little bit, hoping that we'll fill the silence and get them off the hook.
Yep.
And if you don't
Big
do it,
time.
the next thing you know, they're telling you everything you need to know.
Yeah. Or
Which is
going along with your idea, or like it's the old sales trick that what do they say? After you've asked for the sale and presented, the first person to talk loses. Let
That's
them
true.
be,
Yeah.
you know?
But
And it's not
also,
always exactly that, but yeah, it's
not
a good one.
exactly, but also sometimes, like, I need their input because ultimately I'm going to be telling their boss's boss what the
Hmm.
direction should be, and I need it to be as accurate as possible. And they're resisting for some reason that I don't completely understand. So I'm just going to make them uncomfortable so they start telling me. And sometimes, what happens is they tell me why they're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
beautiful. I've worked with an energy company, a big oil and gas company, and I was in there for several months doing some consulting with them, and I had to come up with a new strategy for part of their technology stack. And I was interviewing people, and they thought that we were the Bobs,
Oh yeah.
that I
There
was
for their
sitting, I was,
jobs.
yeah. And
Yep.
so they were like, I'm not telling you anything. And so eventually, with enough, with the right questions and enough silence, I got them to pipe up and go, like, who are you? Why are you asking these questions? What are you going to do with the information I give you? And I was
Yeah.
like, well, that's perfect. Now I'm starting to understand. And so I told them exactly what I was doing, what my purpose was,
Hmm.
what I was going to do with the information, and everything changed. All of a sudden, their face softened, and they were like, oh, we thought we were coming up on layoffs. No,
Nope.
no, I'm not here to do layoffs. I have nothing to do with how your organization is working. I'm
Mm.
just here to make sure your job is easier to do.
Yeah, I'm trying to
I'm
help.
gonna make your technology work, which it doesn't work right now. I'm gonna make it work for you, which means you'll get fewer calls in the middle of the night. I'm making life easier for you. It was interesting, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's I'm just saying that, like, I don't want it to be taken wrong that because it took so long for me to get my degree that I wasn't
No.
learning. I was constantly reading, constantly learning, and that's important. And I also think that when you're starting a career, you have to be willing to learn stuff that's outside your current job because it helps you figure out what you may want to get into next. Where
100%.
you start is not where you're going to finish. And so
Yep.
understand where you go next with your career. And then the other thing is it makes you well rounded
Yep.
so that when they ask, hey, have you ever heard of this? You're not like, no, I only know my one little area. I push the button. That's all
Yeah.
I do. I push the button. All I know about is the button, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
no, you really need to understand more than
Yeah.
that.
No, it's a it's too perfect of it, and I don't think anybody will take it coming off that way. As far as like, because I think you're a really good example of how you can learn and grow and get there, and then go back and get the degree and have everything, right? You can have your cake and eat it too, kind of.
We'll
But
see.
so One more question before we kind of wrap up around this topic. And by the way, I was wondering if you're going to throw any out about so Jeremy mentioned some free training. There's paid training.
Mhm.
Start at YouTube, Google,
Yeah.
Amazon Web Services, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, and just Google their free trainings. You can go to A Cloud Guru if you're willing to pay for it. I give people my login all the time and let them do that. Go look at like an entry
Say
level cert. Yeah,
that.
the practitioner and go do it and pay the
Or he doesn't
$100.
share his credentials with anyone. That's not happening.
No, they're not CDW credentials. Don't worry. They're my personal account that I pay for, and I give them to I work with kids too, and like see like you said the youth and try to help out. And um one more question I want to ask you about this. You said
Yeah.
something to me one time that you're like an excellent, you've helped people with negotiating around their
Oh, yeah.
job and pay. And I think that's a big one that people don't like to talk about. And I'm going to preface it with, I always push people, and sometimes I go overly to get them to understand it. Like you are valuable. And I don't mean that like cheesy, like people are valuable and they undervalue themselves chronically. They
Mhm.
they underestimate themselves, right? Even if they are the type like you that's like out looking and learning, they still don't think they know or can do as much as they can. And really, most employers are looking for enthusiasm, willing to learn, and willing to listen. And it's like if you can do those three, you're golden. Doesn't matter what you know because we can teach you, right? So my question to you would be, what advice would you give to someone who's new and hasn't done a ton? Because you've done a lot of job interviews, applications, negotiations. So like, what's your key advice for getting the best deal for you because you're valuable and you are worth it and you should get paid what you're worth. So what would your advice be?
Really, this is true for all negotiation, not just salary, but you know, what your career path might look like, what your job duties might be, which position you go for. Like when I went for the Microsoft position for a CSA, after I talked through with everybody, and then the last one was the manager, the director, or whatever. And he started asking me, what's important, what's the most important thing when you're talking to a customer or whatever, and about a solution. And and I was saying, well, that that I've thought about all the different pieces of the puzzle, that I have the right partners in place, that I have the right resources in place, that I've listened to the customer and I know exactly what they need. And, I'm putting all that together into a package for them. And he's like, a technical resource would have said, make sure they have enough network bandwidth, make sure like that. You need to be leading these technical people, not being one of the technical people. But so some of it I think is like the biggest thing is preparation. In all negotiation, the most important thing is preparation. You
Mm,
should spend, hours preparing. And what do I mean by that? So uh, whenever you're in a negotiation, the way it works right, is that you have a sense of what they want out of this transaction.
yep.
And you already know what you want, right? But you have a sense of what they are looking for. And sometimes that's not easily discernible from the job rec. So
Sure.
it takes a little bit more work. You might have to research the company and understand what they do, and you might have to look at their financials and see, what kind of shape are they in. But it's really like understand, and maybe go stalk some people on LinkedIn, and understand where their background is. But do some research so that you're prepared. And then what you want to do then is you want to do two things. First of all, prepare some messaging around your value to the company the way you see it in that role.
Mm,
So you need to understand your value. But the other thing is you need to listen to what they say. So when they say, well, we're looking for, and they tell you some things, you need to listen to that and actually think beyond what they're saying to what is the reason behind what they're
yep.
asking for, right?
Gotcha.
And so understanding what their motivations are is very important because you're going to use that when you're negotiating,
Yep.
right? So you can say, well, you can just communicate it. You don't have to actually say it, but you can just communicate that you have the confidence to do the job right. You can win over customers. You can pull together the right technical team. You can, you're a subject matter expert in X, Y, and Z, and all that kind of thing, right? So you know what your value is, and then you also have to do research of what can you get paid.
Yep. That's a
What
good
is the
one.
industry actually paying?
Yep.
You don't want to make yourself too expensive
Sure.
because then, all right. So once you have a sense of like, what could I get paid? What was I paid before? Is that higher or lower than what I could get paid? If let's say it's a step up, you want to get paid more, right? I want to get paid more than I was just paid. Do I have to tell them exactly how much I was paid? The answer is no.
Nope.
You absolutely do not have to tell them exactly what you were paid.
Yep. Although they will try to get you
They will
to
try. Yeah,
inadvertently yeah,
yeah.
well, what are you getting today? And it's like, and you have to be confident enough to say, well, that's not really pertinent to this conversation. I want to talk about the value
I'm
I'm going to
comfortable.
bring and
I'm
what you're
comfortable.
willing to pay. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the strongest position to be in is that you have a job and you're
Oh, by
looking
the
for.
way, I love that answer. I'm comfortable.
Yeah,
Just kind of
right.
there's no what if, ands, or buts. I'm comfortable. It's like,
You want to
okay,
make
question
it so
answer.
it's not like which the attitude you want to have is you want to come from a place of abundance.
Yep.
Don't come from a place of desperation. That's why it's so much easier to get a job when you have a job
Yep.
because it leaks. If you don't have a job, the desperation leaks out of you. You can't
Yep.
help it, right?
Yep.
So you always want to try to find a job while you have a job.
Yep.
And you want to come from that place of abundance of just saying like, um, I'm comfortable with what I'm making right now. I'm not going to make a move based on money because I'm already making what I need to make. Like my family's comfortable. I'm fine. The
Yep.
reason I'm even talking to you is because I'm interested in,
The
right?
technology
And you need to
of
have
this
an answer
vision.
for that. Well, then why are you even looking here? Well,
Yeah.
and you need to have an answer. Why would you even look at them? And if it's just money, you probably shouldn't be looking there,
Yeah.
right?
Agreed.
You need to actually have career growth, not just money growth. Money
Yep.
growth by itself is not fun. You need to actually have career growth, you know.
Like,
And I have friends who have what they call platinum handcuffs, right? A buddy of mine was working for a large company for a long time. He's like, I am not fulfilled in this role. It's a horrible role. They're paying me so much that there's no way anyone else is going to hire me for what they're paying me. I'd have to take a step down in pay, and I'm not sure I want to do that. So don't think that just because somebody offers you a lot of money, that's the way to go. You want to find an opportunity that is actually fulfilling or interesting to you. And then when you come from that place of abundance saying, here's why I want to work for you, I found this to be really compelling. I'm very interested in working for you for that reason. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to lose money to come
yeah.
work for you. I'm not going to do that because I need to support my family. And at some point, I would like to retire.
Yep.
But I'm comfortable right now. Why don't you tell me what you think I'm worth?
Ooh, put it on them. Yeah, that's an old sales tactic. Make
And
them
they're
make the
hard.
first move.
They won't. They usually don't respond right away to that. They usually are like, no, we need to have a range. And I'm like, okay, I give you a range, and I give them a range. It's like,
Yeah.
but it's no. The range is no lower than I would
So
offer because if they will go to the lowest part of that range, by the way.
So break that down. We're going to use small numbers so we're not
Let's say 100
alienating
grand,
listeners. It's
right?
let's say you're making 100 grand today, and
Yeah,
you're at Dell and you're talking to Microsoft, and you really want to get at least 125, but you'd love 150, right?
right.
What would be the if that guy puts that question on you, that guy or gal, and they say, give me a range. How do you, if you're making 100, how do you say I'd
100
like
to
one?
200.
What is it?
100 to 200. I
Yeah,
say, yeah,
damn. So
somewhere
you give them a
between.
big old range. I like
Yeah,
that.
somewhere between, or I'll go, I'm expecting like 150 to 200. Like if I want 150, then I'll say 150 to 200 is probably what I would want to leave the safety net that I have right now.
Yeah,
I'm
try something
very
out.
interested. Like I said, what you're doing is really compelling in whatever it is you find interesting for them. That's very compelling. But it would probably take somewhere around 150 to 200 for me to leave.
Yeah.
And usually what they'll say is, if it's tough, they'll say, "Oh, I don't think we can do that." And then I'll just say, usually I'm just like, "Well, okay. I mean, um, are you going to take this back to the hiring manager, or are you just going to dismiss it right now?" And usually they'll say, well, I'm going to take it back to him, but I have a feeling he's not going to be interested. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Yep. Let them go.
You
Let them decide and come
have to,
back to
you
you.
have to decide, what are you willing to leave for, right?
Yep.
And whatever that is, like, go a little bit more and put that as your low end, because you want some room to go below, because they're going
Yeah.
to try to make you do that. You already know that,
Yep.
right? And the other thing is, the hiring manager oftentimes has some latitude to not pay the lowest amount. They
Sure.
usually have a range. And so, what you need to do is communicate the value that you're going to bring to the hiring manager. Not, don't try to do that to the HR person who's trying to negotiate benefits
Looking
and
at a pay
salary
scale.
with you. No, they are not. They are not your friend. They are not there to try to go, oh, I'm in HR and I think that this person is worth that much. They're not going to do that. The hiring manager will do that. The hiring manager or their upper management will do that. So save that for them. With the HR folks, you just need to be like, here's my range.
Yep.
And by the way, you know, I don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to do anything. I'm fine. And
Keep in
sometimes
mind
I'll
too.
even
Go
when
ahead.
even when I'm not fine and I need to get out of that situation because of whatever reason, I'm
Yep.
still like, I'm fine. I don't need to
Yep.
go anywhere.
Be patient. Let it come to you. And the HR person. One thing to point out, folks. Some HR people make great money, but not a lot do. And sometimes that they hear that range and they go, "Whoa, hold on. You have
What the
4 years
heck?
of I've been doing this for 12 years." You know what I mean? And it's like, well, hold
Yeah.
on. It's not. It's never apples to apples. It's never apples to oranges. And I really liked that advice overall. So I think that's huge for
Well,
folks. And
there's another piece of preparation, and that is have a conversation with your significant other about
yes,
what is reasonable. And so what I mean by that is I've had conversations with my wife about, okay, I know that I could probably get in this range, but I don't know how that pay is coming. And so
yep,
you've seen this with AWS. They have a long-standing tradition of underpaying salary and giving you lots of, they'll give you
stock
like a huge cash advance and they'll give you a bunch of stock, a huge cash signing bonus, and they'll give you a bunch of stock that'll mature whenever it matures. And,
3 years.
yeah, I mean,
3 year
and
cycle. You get some each year, but it
yeah,
gets it's front loaded or
well,
back loaded, so it's all in the third year, and then you recycle. And no,
it's one of the ways that they like you is that at the end of every year, if they're continuing to give you stock that appreciates in 3 years, okay, I'm
yep.
doing a good job. If they stop giving you stock,
And then you got a
you're all
problem.
of a sudden not as busy. Like, yeah, you need to get out.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, so it's like understanding that there's different ways for compensation to happen.
Yep.
And what we do is we sit down with our budget and say, well, technically this is how much we need to pay all the bills, and we've already said, well, one of our bills is storing or saving money for each kid's education after
Yep.
college and stuff, for weddings, and things like that. And so those
And
are
for
those
your
are part of
retirement.
our for our
Yeah. You're.
retirement, right? And so all
Yep.
of those are so we have a sense then, okay, if I need that much a month, what does that turn into in terms of a yearly salary? That's how much take home I need to have, right? And then at that point, it's pretty easy to say, okay, well, I know that I need, say, 100,000 to live, but I want 125,
Hmm.
and I ask for 150, or I want 150. I might be willing to take 125 to leave the safety net of my current job. And then they come back with 130, but 20 of that is going to be in, stock.
Yep.
And you can go, can I still pay all the bills? Yeah. What does their stock price look like? And what does it look like over the last, year or 2 years? Oh man, it's like hockey sticking. Okay, I don't know. What's the entire tech industry doing? Oh, everything's hockey sticking. I don't know. Maybe I do it. I
Yep.
mean, you have some decisions to make, but be open to multiple ways of getting compensated.
Yep.
And oftentimes I would get well, we can, the 150 example, we can meet the 150. 10 of that is going to be a starting bonus, and
Yep.
we'll give 30 in stock that'll appreciate, over the course of 3 years. Every year you'll be able to pull some of that, a third of it out. And so there's all different mechanisms they come up with,
Yep.
to try to meet your requirement. But ultimately, you need to know if it's reasonable. And then you also need to be able to communicate to the hiring manager that you're going to bring in enough value that it's worth it for him to do, or him or her to do that, right?
Yep. To go
So
get that extra approval to push that range.
yeah, so that's why I say like preparation is the biggest part. And then the other thing is staying cool under pressure, because they will pressure you.
Yep.
And I've even had them say, and I think this is probably illegal, but they did it anyway. We need to see your W-2s.
Yep. I've had that.
And I'll
I
say,
didn't
well,
want to butt in. I've had
like
them do
why?
that. Yep.
And I
Income
asked them, well, why?
verification.
Why do you want to see that income verification? You are not allowed to ask actually what I made last year. Oh no, we mean that you were being paid and all that. I'm like, oh, okay, great. So I make a copy of my W-2 and then I get a black Sharpie marker and I
Get
mark
rid of
out
the year to
everything that has
date.
a dollar figure. All dollar figures are marked out. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Because you don't want, yeah.
I fax it to them or take a picture and email it to them. I'm like, there you go. Proof I
Yep.
was working for this company last year. How's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I've had that a couple of times
And they don't have anything to say about that, by the way. They didn't
no.
even complain. They said
Yeah.
nothing, because what could they say?
They were trying to, yeah, they're trying to get one over, right? And
Yes.
sometimes you might have someone who's in a position where they're not making as much, and maybe they
Yeah.
kind of negotiated awesome and they're getting a big jump, and then it's like, whoa, and you have a heart attack, right? But then other times I had one where it was like, oh yeah, bam, exactly what we talked about. Like, and then okay, thank you. See, move on, right?
Yeah.
One more question for you. So you've been part of some startups, and I think one that I've had people approach me with a lot, and it's always been a tough one for me because I feel like there's been some times where maybe I should have, but none of them have panned out where I missed out on some big sale. But for folks who aren't in this yet, what will happen is as you become valuable in your job, especially if you're, a people person out there killing it, you might have people approach you who are a CEO of their own company, and they go, hey, what you guys do at that job is great. And I want to start something, and I'll make you a partner, and we're going to be 50-50 in this. And, I'm going to pay you half of what you make now. Maybe you're making 160, but I'll pay you 80 grand, but you're going to have half of the company. We're going to go public. You're going to be a multimillionaire, right? And there's realities to that of like, sure, there are people all the time who go into startups and they work their butt off and they become like they have amazing exits, right? There's also people who, 20 years later, you're still not public, and guys are telling you, hey, man, I can get you 3 times the pay. You're a great employee. And he's like, oh, but we're going to go public next month, right? And it's like, so any thoughts on that, or any
Yeah.
strategies?
Yeah. So, well, this really goes to your risk aversion, right?
Mm,
So,
yeah.
I'll give you a couple examples. This is going to kill you. I was consulting for this company called The Planet Internet Services in Dallas. I did a bunch of consulting with them, and one of the folks that I worked with all the time, Lance Crosby, just a great guy. He was their chief legal counsel, and he also just did a lot of work in the business and everything, and I would do a lot of consulting through him. So I knew a bunch of the folks there, and there were several of them that said, "We're going to go start our own company to do the same thing, but we're going to do it better." We've seen all the problems that have cropped up here because of the way that the way that they're doing things. We're going to do things fresh and new, and it's going to be 100 times better. We're doing a startup. Would you like to join? You'll be one of the founders, so you get a ton of stock, but you'd also, like you said, get paid really, really bad. You'd get paid probably
Yep.
half of what you're getting paid now.
Yep.
And what do you think? Well, like normally, like right now, my risk profile is pretty high. I'd be happy to do that.
Sure.
Um,
For the
but
right opportunity, right?
the right opportunity. But back then, I had let me think. That was, yeah, 5 kids.
Yep.
Right, so I had 5 kids at the time, and I was like, can't do that. I have a huge family to support. Like, I just can't do that.
Yeah.
So they did it. They started their own company. They started to become very successful, and their name is SoftLayer. and they were bought by IBM.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that sounds
The
familiar.
IBM Cloud and SoftLayer. So
If
Lamb,
you would, do you know what the number would have been? Are you comfortable talking that
I just
deep?
know that I don't know exactly what the number would have been because I didn't,
Even like
I
a
didn't,
order of, are we
they didn't
talking
give me an
Decamillionaire
actual offer,
overnight?
right?
Or
Yeah, no, it wasn't overnight. It took, several years.
no, I mean, had you been there for the exit as a founder
Oh,
with a
oh
decent
yeah,
share, I mean, are we talking,
I'd be retired.
hundreds of million for the wow.
No, not
For
hundreds of
the
millions.
how
It
big
would
was
have
the
been
company?
tens of
Tens
millions,
of
probably. Yeah,
wow.
but I mean, I don't know how many billions they paid for SoftLayer, but
Yeah, but what
IBM.
would those 7 years have been like, right?
Oh, I
Too,
know. Yeah.
making the dirt money and maybe you got a divorce and you're not there around your kids, so it really is a
Some of the
trade-off, right?
founders were like that. They had just a really, really tough time. And it was crazy hard work and low pay, and just kind of like that the business was slowly, getting better and better. And then all of a sudden it just started taking off. And then when that happened, when it really took off, they ended up buying the planet. So they bought the company that they separated from,
Oh
right?
wow.
And
Yeah.
then they ended up buying the Planet Internet, and then they continued to grow. IBM was going, I like this. I like your model. I like what you're doing. Like, this is a great private cloud model. And so IBM bought them. But and I still I know some of those guys still. I every once in a while I'll ping them, but
Yep.
yeah, they're doing really, really well. They're
Well,
doing
and let's
really,
point
really well
out too.
financially. Yeah,
Let's
but
point
it's
out
all
that
risk, right?
yeah, it's already, and there's more risk too. So you have the 7 years you have to make less money, and you're
Yeah,
hoping everything's going to go well, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it crashes and burns, right? But also, then once you get bought, most of the time you have to stick around, and yeah,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
you like the
They all
startup
did.
culture in your company, you get to watch it kind of cannibalized and torn
Yeah.
apart and eaten up. It's a really weird thing. I'm still young, so I have the opportunity if I want to put myself through that to look at it, and I know you still could too.
Yeah,
But it's daunting, to
yeah.
go do something like that. But then we know people who have done some amazing
Oh
things
yeah.
on their own,
I have
and
another friend who started like he saw this gap that Adobe had, and so he was just like, well, they're not filling it, and I've told them you need to do this, and they haven't done it, so I'm just going to do it. So he
Mhm.
created his own software that filled this gap that Adobe had. And then after a while, they became more and more successful. Same thing though, like just his wife was working as well, right? And so between the two of them, they were able to like make ends meet, but it was crazy hard work for him and a lot of travel and not a lot of pay.
Yeah.
But they became better and better known, more and more recognized. He made really good software. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's
Yep.
quality product. But eventually, what happened is he got enough market share that Adobe said, "Hey, you know what? You were right. We should have done this. We're going to
Yep.
buy you."
Yep.
And so they bought him, and then he had to come with it though and make
Yep.
sure that it integrated properly into the suite, and that
They get the value.
everybody, yeah, like he still was leading that team, leading the ship, and but he's done a couple of things. I like to call him a serial entrepreneur, but
Yeah.
he actually lives not too far from us, so
Yeah.
really, really good guy, great family. But then there's the other startups that I've done or the other startups that I know of and have done where it was a great idea, but before its time, and then frankly, like with one of them, it was just mismanaged.
Yep.
You know,
That can happen.
the first one totally mismanaged. They just were doing stupid things, and I was there for a year. And once I saw how they were mismanaging, I'm just like, I got to get out of here before this thing just implodes. It's
Yeah.
easier to find a job when you have a job. So I'm like, yeah,
Totally.
I'm out. So, um, I did. I got out, and then the other startup was, I mean, it was the same idea as the first one, storage as a service, right? Like, imagine a cloud storage service
Yeah.
before there was really cloud,
Yep.
like 2000 and 2001. There
Wow.
was, there was no
Dang.
cloud. There was no cloud, right? So it was
Yeah.
just like, I'm in a colo. I'm offering up storage to you, and you are in the colo as well. You have a bunch of compute and stuff, and I'm just gonna offer you backup targets, storage, entire systems, whatever. But I'm just offering that to you as a service.
Is that what you called it at the time, as a service, or what did
Yeah,
they call that?
storage as a
Okay.
service. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was, storage networks, and then storage provider.
Yeah.
Storage provider, it folded because basically we thought we had the funding. The CEO thought he had the funding. He was kind of promised the funding, but it doesn't actually, it's not there until it's there.
Yeah.
And the day that they were going to give him the funding, they said, we changed our minds. And he had, at that point, there was no more money to keep the company going. So it folded. But
Wow. Bummer.
yeah, so I mean, thankfully, I had some contacts in the industry, and I ended up going to work for a consulting company doing, Veritas clusters, setting up
Hmm.
Veritas cluster service, and
Nice.
doing that kind of stuff. I knew Solaris really well by that time, and as well. So anyway, yeah, I mean, you do what you have to, but startups, like, you have to think about your risk profile. You always have to think about, um, you know, what's my payout? What are the odds? And then you really need a lawyer if you're going to be one of the founders.
That's a good tip.
You really need a lawyer to be looking over that paperwork, because there's, like, it's just so, like, every lawyer does this. They think with their client in mind, not the other person.
Absolutely.
That's what they're supposed to do, right? They're
Yeah.
not supposed to say, well, I'm going to make sure that they benefit as much as you. No, that's not what they're there for. They're hired
Mhm.
by them. They're going to make sure they are getting exactly what they need, and they have the benefits. They are, they have the advantage. So you have to make sure there's somebody on your side who knows how to read all that crap.
Yep.
Because a lot of it is just like words that you think you know what they mean, but in legal terms they mean something different. So you got to be careful.
Like
But
perpetuity.
right,
Can
I
I?
mean, I'm just saying you need a lawyer,
Yeah.
and you also need to take a really, really hard look at your finances and be able to live on a fraction of what you're living on. And you also need to be thinking about what happens if this just craters. What can I do between the time it craters and the time I find my next thing? And once again, it's easier to find a job when you have a job.
Yep.
So
Yep.
just think about that, and I know that's a
Especially
lot
if
of
you're
risk.
coming out
And
of a failed business, right? If you're the
I don't mean to be
founder of
silly.
a failure, that
I
must
don't
be
mean to,
that's
no, that's not always bad, actually, because you
true.
can talk about what you learned,
Good
right? And you
point.
can, and any kind of endeavor, especially a startup, you wear so many hats. You learn so much about just
It's a
overall
great
how
point.
business is done. So there's a lot of benefits to doing it. It's just, I'm just saying, go in with your eyes completely wide open. When you're dealing with startups, you really need to have someone objective, that is coming in and saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And have an objective set of eyes, because it's real easy for a founder, to dazzle you with vision, right?
Yep.
And you can get lost in that, and sometimes you kind of lose your footing in reality, and that reality will hit you really hard when you least expect it. You need someone who has that objective, third point of view, who has not been dazzled by the founder, and can actually look objectively at what the offer is, and just where you stand, right? And not just the legal advice, but I mean somebody who, has been there and done that.
Can
You
I
know?
ask one more
Yeah,
before I
yeah.
let you go here? So you strike me as someone who, and I know this because of how you did it with me. You are amazing at building relationships with people very quickly and identifying people that you can benefit and will benefit you from building that. And I imagine you've got some, I'd love to talk to you about it in future conversations, but I imagine you've had some good mentors over the years. And I think mentorship and relationships is almost more important than anything. I don't care if you are the back of house engineer or you are a CEO. Everybody has people they learn from and they absorb from, and it's really important to find that. So I know you got to go, and we're gonna wrap up. But give me your quick tips on how do you build those relationships so quickly and so smoothly that I didn't even realize you were doing it until it was already like we're best buds and doing all this work together. Like, and any tips on for people who are just starting out, what to look for in a mentor, or what you need? Because to your point, you need a lawyer, you need mentors too. You need people who've been there, done that, that can impart knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, so I think it's just as important to understand what you need from someone else as to understand what you can give them that they need. So I think part of the reason that I know how to build relationships is because I'm always trying to think about, what do they need? Like what, how can they benefit and what do they really want? So when I'm talking to a lot of people will say, you need to go to a CIO and say, like, what are your top 10 pains? And it's like, oh my gosh, like everybody is asking them that kind of thing. So you don't necessarily want to do that, right? But what you're trying to figure out is like, how can I benefit them? And so if you take it from the perspective of I want to serve others rather than I want something out of Corey, right? If
Yeah.
I'm thinking that, then I'm going to be asking for, give me this, give me this, give me this, and it's all going to be about me. But what I really want is a relationship with Corey because
Yep.
I know you have strengths and frankly your group has services that complement mine. And
Yep.
together, like we can do more. So what I'm really trying to figure out is how can I serve Corey, right? Because when I serve Corey, he's going to appreciate that I'm there,
Yeah.
right? And you're gonna want to spend time with me because that time is seen as valuable and you get something out of it. And we
Yep.
start building this relationship because I'm willing to think about you. And this is the same thing, by the way, in a marriage.
Yeah. No, for
If in a
sure.
marriage, if all you're only thinking about what I need, me, right? Your
Yep.
marriage is going to suck, you know. So ultimately,
Yep.
both of you have to be thinking about the other person. How can I give? What are their needs? How can I meet them? And that's especially true with clients, but it's also true of salespeople. And it's why sometimes I reach out and I say, hey, do you want me to do this? And they're like, well, yeah, but I didn't think you would. I'm like, well, it just seemed like you probably needed this. Like recently, just today, actually. Um, I said 2 days ago, we need to send in questions for this RFP. Nobody did anything, right? And I waited. Yesterday I sent something out again. Hey, we need to create questions because they're due, tomorrow, which is today. Nobody did anything. So this morning, I I connected with the person who is supposed to be creating the questions. It's not even my,
Yep.
it's not DCT, right? It's not my group. None of the RFP is my group, but I want to build a relationship with that university's CIO. And so I know that I need to get in front of them, right? And I need to do something they want. And so what am I doing? I'm going to that person and saying that technology discipline and saying, what are some questions? Here's exactly what they're looking for. Here, let me tell you what they want in this RFP. That's just this. Can you create some questions? They came up with a few. I used ChatGPT to create some more,
Yep.
and and then we worked them all together. And then I went to the sales rep, right? And I said, hey, who's the single point of contact for the RFP response? Crickets. We need to send this in. Crickets. So what did I do? I created an email
Hmm.
with the questions that needed to go to the RFP manager, right?
Yep. Yep.
At that university. I created the email with all the questions. I did everything for them. And eventually I got a response from the sales team. And so I just forwarded the email and said, just copy and paste this into an email. Send it to this email address. Copy the following people. That's all you have to do. Copy, paste, make it happen. Now, what have I done? Am I enabling? I mean, maybe a little bit, but ultimately what I'm doing is I'm building a relationship with that rep,
Yep.
right? I'm doing something for them that maybe isn't even in my job description. Okay, so none of that was in my job description.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
But I'm creating a relationship. They know they can count on me,
Yep.
right? Um, they know that I will work, and this was
Yep.
after hours. They know that I'll work, and I'm making business. I'm helping to earn business for them, and it's not
Yep.
even my group. So all I'm
That
doing is,
they'll
you see what I'm
appreciate.
saying? This
Yeah.
is how you build the relationship. I did the same thing for the call that you were on, the sales leader that you were talking to that called me first.
Yep.
The reason she called me first
Yep. Because you've done things for her before, right?
that have nothing to do with my job, but I know
So
what
she
she needed.
knows. Yeah.
I know what
Gotcha.
she needed. And so I'm like, I'm going to serve you. I'm going to do something for you
Yep.
because I want a relationship with you. I don't want like a one-way
Yeah.
leech-like relationship. That's not what I'm looking for. I will
Yep.
do stuff for you. And then what I ask is really simple. When you have an opportunity, can you get me in front of the leadership for this engagement? And that's what I asked the sales leader for that one university for the thing that I just talked about, the responding with the questions. I said, I'll do this. Like I
Yep.
will run this for you because no one will run it, right?
Mhm.
It's two different disciplines. I'm not going to throw them under the bus and tell you what they are on
I
video.
got you.
Two different folks.
Yep.
Neither of those technology disciplines will own the response.
Yep.
And he's like, can you help me? I'm like, yes, I will help you. Can you please
Get
get
me a
me in
meeting.
front of their leadership? I want to talk to the CIO of that university. I want to have, and I want to bring Corey in too,
Yep.
because I know they're looking at cloud. I know they're looking at data. I know it.
Yep.
And Corey's the guy. Like he's the guy who has all that in his quiver of
Well,
arrows. I don't have that anymore now that we've joined the CDW. I don't have that anymore.
yep.
Corey and I are the dynamic duo.
Well, what about the mentee side? So do you do the same thing for mentors, or is it a slightly different approach? And I know you got to go, like, probably got
So are
to
you talking
meet with the
about
wife.
being a mentor or
No, fine.
being a
So like I feel like at our point at different levels, we can mentor other people. So that's an interesting combo to have in the future. But really for people who are starting out, or maybe people who've been maybe they are 10 years in their career, but they feel like they're stuck. I feel like one of the biggest things you can do is get connected with someone who's that next level and get some mentoring. And people like to do it. People enjoy giving back. But I think a lot of people don't know how to go about that. Even if they know, like let's say they know exactly who they want to mentor them,
Oh,
like
okay.
what's the strategy? How if you let's say you're back to 25 and you're fresh out and you have this mentor or this person who's two levels above you at your company, or maybe they're outside of your business completely, but you're really impressed with them. How would you approach that to build that mentor mentee relationship?
Yeah, so one thing you can do is request a skip level. So a skip level one-on-one, do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I've never heard of skip level.
Yeah, so oftentimes your boss will say, "Oh yeah, once a month or once a week or whatever it is." They'll say, "Oh, once a quarter, we'll have a one-on-one, and we
Hmm.
can just talk about whatever your career here, whatever it is." You can ask for a skip level. Hey, can you give me a skip level with your leader if that's the person?
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah,
kind
the
of
other
have your boss introduce you to that director that you're hoping to know
and
or
a
whatever.
skillful interview is a very common thing to have, so they'll do it. The other thing you can do is like do something for them, so oftentimes that person, like maybe they're leading a call and they're like, if everybody would just do, this, or here's the new thing that we're rolling out or whatever. Um, you could just execute the heck out of that and then send them a note and say, by the way, I took your advice, and I did X, Y, Z, and here are the results. And oftentimes that just starts a conversation,
Yeah.
right? And then if they respond favorably, they're giving you a window, like they're giving you an opportunity to continue the conversation. You have to be careful not to waste their time, but
Yep.
if you do it right, you can start to build a relationship with them, even though it's not very strong. But if you're starting to build that relationship, what happens is you get the opportunity to then ask for that. And I would just straight up ask, will you be a mentor?
I was
Like
gonna
this is what
say,
we
being
do.
direct about it once
This is
you've
what we
kind of
not
laid
do.
that groundwork, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So Thanks for all that, Jeremy. This has been amazing, a great follow-up. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate you doing this. And I look forward to bringing you back on to talk about specific topics and
That'd be great.
dive in. So, good night. Thank you, Jeremy, and
Take care,
signing
Corey.
off.